Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pest Marketing Podcast. Today's guest is returning to the show. I'm excited to have her back. Margaret Garcia is the president of Grit PPO, the first female-owned and operated outsourced call center dedicated to the pest control industry. And over the past 8 years, Margaret and her team have helped pest control, wildlife, and lawn care companies build high-performing contact center operations that improve lead conversion, customer experience, and operational efficiency. And as a quick note, since we're recording this during Women's History Month, it's worth recognizing that Margaret is a true pioneer in the industry, building something that didn't exist before in pest control. In our last appearance on the show, we talked a lot about customer service systems. Today, we're taking that conversation a step further and diving into something that doesn't get talked about enough: how your office team can determine whether or not you hit your next million in pest control. Margaret, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Andrew. How's it
It's really
going?
good to have you back. It's good. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. You really didn't hold anything back in our last discussion and dropped a lot of gold nuggets that I suspect plenty of our listeners walked away with some knowledge that they were able then to take back to their customer service team and maybe look at it a different way. So I have a handful of questions for you here, and I expect today will be just as valuable for our audience. So let's dive in. How much revenue does the average pest control company lose because of missed calls or poor lead handling?
Yeah, I think that for companies we see that bring us in for the overflow and the after hours, they're typically missing, I would say, anywhere between 15 to even 25% of like their inbound, calls. And when the phone's answered, another kind of chunk of those leads can potentially never even get scheduled and converted because of if their call handling is weak. And so if your average new customer is worth anywhere between that 600 and 1,000 kind of mark, I mean, you can do the math pretty quickly. I think that companies, it's not unusual for them to lose anywhere between, 200,000 plus year in potential revenue just disappearing right through the phones. So, it's a lot.
It's a lot, and also it's a tricky calculation, right? Because it's an opportunity cost that doesn't directly hit your bottom line, right?
Mhm.
It's not like an expense where you've collected all that revenue and then you're seeing it being chipped away at. It's like it was never collected to begin with.
Yeah.
So visually, it's not like it's something that shows up in QuickBooks, right? Like you're just not seeing it ever even make its way to you. So doing that math, like quantifying the loss, it just becomes more difficult for an owner. It's like you kind of probably know intuitively as an
Mhm.
owner that some leads and revenue is slipping through your fingers. I suspect that until they get a company like you in there to actually help them deal with the overflow, deal with the missed calls, and then all of a sudden they're watching all that revenue come in, they're not even aware of it. Is that ever shocking for pest control operators where they sort of look at what they were missing out on and their jaw just drops because they didn't realize how much it was?
Yeah, it happens all the time. We're big on metrics. I mean, you can't sell everything as far as, sales calls, but we are big on giving out data so that you can make internal business decisions. And I think that there's a lot of focus on, the trucks, on the chemicals, on the routes, while the biggest leak sometimes in the bucket is just sitting quietly in the office next to the phone. I mean, for me, I've grown up in this industry and I've always known that, the phones are basically the cash register of the pest control industry. Everything runs through it. And we work with companies, even just in our call support services, where they say, we ask them, do you know what your phone volume is? Do you have metrics? No, but I'm assuming maybe I get 25 to 30 calls a day. And then we turn the phones on and we give them metrics. And it's like, no, Andrew, you were answering, but you actually get 125 a day, and so it's hard sometimes to put numbers to that. But like you said, you have instincts on the phone rang. I didn't get a chance to answer it. That could have been, especially in termite season, right? What could that call have been? I know what it cost me, but what did it really cost you?
And yeah, to your point, it's not even just about the lost revenue. It's about the fact that you actually spent money to get these leads, whether through building your brand
Yep.
or through actual advertising dollars. So it's like there's money spent. Your marketing team was bringing that back in the form of leads and you missing those calls, which is you're really being hit from both sides because it both cost you money and you lost the potential revenue, the downstream effects of that, right? The potential referrals that
Yep.
could have come from that customer, all those
The
things.
lifetime value of it, sure.
On to my next question. What booking rate should a strong office team achieve from inbound leads in your experience?
Yeah, this is a hard one. I think that it's tempting to throw a number out, but the truth is it's really different for every company. We try to decipher this when we're taking on new campaigns, new partners, when their focus is for us is selling, is what should this number be? And I find that there's a lot of different variables for every single company. There's geographic location, there's, competitor saturation, there's what your scheduling availability is, what your service programs offerings are, there's what are you doing for marketing? What are the lead quality? What's the lead quality of the calls that are actually coming in? So there's kind of no, one number that I think you live up to. I think what I try to tell owners is just to look internally and just always try to move the needle a little bit. Don't focus necessarily on the number. I mean, you can establish some baseline numbers, but there's all these variables that go into it to not be able to say that it's just an industry standard.
I would imagine you have some idea maybe of like a low end of the range and a high end of the range, right? It's not that one is necessarily good or bad
Right.
because of all the factors that go into that. But what would the low end of the range be
Yeah.
that would still be reasonable, and then the high end of the range?
Yeah. See, like we work with companies where they have really high one-time services, or they only focus on offering, ongoing annual programs, no one-time. So you see those sales conversions, those are converting at a lower rate. So, right, you get 40 to 50%. We work with companies where they do really great with their leads, with their marketing, but they're New York City based. And so because of that saturation market of competition where you're competing with unlicensed $99 pest control, I never see conversions go above 50, 55%. We work with some companies that are super aggressive and they, don't have scheduling issues and they're really aggressive on their discounts and they want to get that ongoing revenue on the schedule. And we close at 85% over the phone. So there's such a huge variance in, the company, what their growth goals are, and also, kind of like I said, what's going on around them.
Interesting. So maybe you can sort of continue to double click on this a little bit. So, because a lot of the clients that we work with, they want to close as many customers as possible, right? If they're paying for the leads, they want to do everything they can to win that business. So, other way I'd like to ask this question is like, what are the factors that go into a really high close rate, right? Because we definitely agree that there's a lot of factors that can swing things one way or the other, right? Either it'll be a lower close rate because of market saturation or because they don't offer any kind of one-time service. So what are the things that you see companies do that make it possible for them to have the highest close rate possible?
Yeah, I think first thing has got to be, what you're offering. Have multiple offerings, meaning different packages, have different services that cater to the same pests so that people move into. People tend to make choices in the middle, right? So if I have a couple different options, we're going to pick one up. I'm going to leave this call with selling this customer something and getting them on the service for something. So having different options, I think personally helps. I'm not against companies that are leaning toward ongoing programs as their only offering because we know from a pest control standpoint that, that IPM and preventative is all a part of it. But a lot of consumers just want the one and done. And it's really hard, right, to convince somebody in the middle of July that just got that one bee's nest by the light fixture onto an ongoing program. And don't get me wrong, we can do it. But, right, you're asking me what's best. What's best is to have different options in some way, shape, or form. Being able to schedule and, have the ability to get out there as fast as possible. If you're booked out 2 weeks, obviously that's going to play a factor in your ability to convert opportunities. So multiple offerings, scheduling, even discounts, giving me ammunition to be able to not just build value, but step down without having to go to a one-time service. So can I discount the ongoing program in some way, shape, or form? And there's lots of times where that's times of the year, I should say, where that's a big deal, right? Going into the season right now, people are getting mailers, $50 off the initial, like all of those things. So you have to be able to compete with those things. So scheduling, offerings, discounts, all of that is, I think, a mix for a great opportunity to convert.
Those are really good factors to be looking at. And yeah, I think most of our clients are not necessarily going all in on what can I do to close more business, right? Usually they want a healthy mix of the one time, but they want to build as much equity value in their company. And so they're definitely focused on general pest control. Some clients don't want to offer a discount, right? Because they don't want that perception of their brand, or they don't want that type of clientele. And all of these things are just a matter of trade-offs, right? I mean, do you want a higher close rate with a different set of customers that you're going to have to win over through some of these tactics, or a lower close rate with what you might consider more customers who are your ideal type of customer because
Yeah.
you're not battling it out for them?
Yeah.
I'm curious. Go ahead.
No, I'm thinking, I get that the perception might be that's not the type of client that I'm looking for if I have to give them a discount. But really, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think that this is when you're talking about over the phone, right? Maybe not necessarily face to face, but when you're talking about over the phone, right? Customers know that they're calling into companies to be sold to, but they want to feel like they're a part of, right, the buying process. And so I just think like things like coupons or discounts or lowering rates are part of that phone finesse conversation. So if there's a certain price point that you want to be at, then, start high and then offer, if I really want to be at $700 for this program, then say that it's $750, but I'll be able to offer, right, a $50 coupon. I mean, that's what I feel like it's just a part of the phone finesse strategy, not necessarily that you don't want that kind of client. I just think it's how the conversation flows. That is really the variable behind offering discounts and coupons necessarily.
Do you guys take note of whether or not a pest control company has pricing on their website when you partner with them? And does that affect your experience of working with the leads that you get from leads who are at least have the option to have seen the pricing on the website? Do you guys like factor that in or think about that at all?
It's something that I never really thought about. I don't kind of, check to see whether they're offering. We want to know if that's something that's there, but it doesn't make a difference in, determining how you're presenting your calls or what you're going into it with. I worked for a company for many years. I think everybody kind of knows by now, it was JP McHale, and Richard McHale used to always say, sell the company, not the service, not the price. You weren't focused on that. And so at the end of the day, the only thing that I think giving pricing over the website does sometimes is potentially miss out on people that don't want to interact and they see the price and you don't get the opportunity to build the value. That's the only kind of thing. But I think if you can get them on the phone, if you can be able to, talk about the same pricing, you want to have the same price points as what's on the website. It's kind of just like, me giving you a price and then I give you one price and then your neighbor down the street calls me and I give them another price. We don't want to conflict there, but that's the only factor of knowing that the prices on the website is not contradicting it.
And do you notice a difference at all? Like, do you have any clients who have a really strong, unique, like, brand, meaning they've done a good job of differentiating themselves among, right? Because usually what I end up explaining to pest control operators is, as their marketing company, it's up to us to help them differentiate themselves among all the other pest control companies around. Because pest control itself as a service is a commodity. I mean, there are thousands, right? At any given time, there are about 20,000 active pest control companies, and there's only 52 states, right? So I mean, there are so many options, and as the marketing company, if we can help our clients differentiate themselves in a meaningful way, which helps them get their prospects' attention,
Yeah.
and helps them be memorable. So it's super important to us from the marketing perspective. I'm curious, do you find that matters at all when you're actually on a sales call and like someone has a really strong brand?
It's funny that you say that because when we onboard new partners, we're always asking them what makes you stand out. And I mean, across like 200 some odd companies over the past, 7 years, everyone starts with, we've got these bronze, silver, gold programs, and we're a family owned business and we've been in business for umpteen years and our technicians are knowledgeable. And I have to break it to them and go, that's not really a differentiator. And I can say that wholeheartedly because, I'm in all the states and in all the surrounding areas. And so we look for the things. And sometimes it's just about getting companies to talk. I'm sure you do this, right? Talk more about themselves to figure out what you can pick out. We love the companies that are, veteran owned and they kind of, put that all over their branding and they give back to the community. So like if somebody, contributes to a particular charity fund all the time, when we're presenting, what I call ammunition, when you're building the value in the service, we'll talk about that just like it's a part of, we schedule preventative treatments, but the purpose of this program is that you have on-demand pest control. And we also, participate in this XYZ charity and we give back to the community. We're pillars of so anything that makes them kind of stand out personally, we absolutely bring it into talking about, the value in the program.
Interesting. That's great. And do you try to get do you try to have your sales language match the language that's on the website, right? Because the website is often going to be the first impression that a potential customer gets. And they've done at least a little bit of reading on the website. So they have certain expectations, right, when they call in.
Hmm.
So do you guys match that language, or maybe vice versa? Do you say, okay, based on our conversation, based on the things that you've told us make you unique and valuable to a customer, you really want those things to show on the website. That way they actually get to see those things. And when they call in to speak with us, there are no surprises here. There's like continuity between what they're expecting based on
Yeah.
what they read and the conversation that we're having.
Yeah, I talk about this in our inside sales workshop is that you want to make sure like you have that brand recognition going on. And so if your website is showcasing certain vernacular, you want to absolutely build that into your conversations. And so again, I go back to my experience. The company that I worked for, the owner was an amazing, marketing and pillar of knowledge. And when tick services became very kind of popular, he would want us as CSRs to say we are stewards of the community and we are stewards of the environment. And I just couldn't say it naturally. Like stewards was like a local grocery shop. So like I just didn't, I sounded funny saying it. And so because I couldn't say it naturally, I avoided saying it. And so, right, he would get very frustrated listening to the calls, like, why aren't more people saying this? So I think that there's also a two-part to that. Yes, you want to showcase your website and have all those words, but you also want to make it easy and natural for your team to be able to use the same, terminology so that you are building that value. And you're right, you do want to have continuity between the two. So the way that you're showcasing your services on the internet is absolutely what helps you build the same value. I mean, I know for us, when we're representing companies, we don't work with scripts, but I kind of already know over the course of 25 years, like what sells programs. And it is those words, the preventative, the trust, the guarantee, the words that everybody's showcasing on their websites.
Have you guys done any first party research, maybe shared any of your first party research publicly in some sort of report? For example, we've done a couple of internal research projects recently. One where we analyzed, I think it was about 3,000 phone calls of sales qualified leads from, it was October through the end of, I want to say it was February or maybe sometime in January. Might have been September through January. And we were trying to understand what the priorities of those sales qualified leads were. What were the things, what questions were they asking? What were their frustrations? What were they looking for? Pulling quotes. And then we did a similar study where of those, we took a subset of those calls that we analyzed, and these were people who were switching providers, and they voiced openly that they were actively looking for a new company. And we took a look at what were they saying about their previous company as to why they were actually switching. And we found in that case that the number one reason they were switching was because the problem wasn't solved. And so they were actively voicing frustration that their company they were currently with could not solve the problem that they had. And since this was a winter fall study, this was mostly regarding rodents getting into the home. I'm curious if you guys do any of that research internally and if you've shared any of that.
Yeah, we've always been big on the value in data. So AI has made it a lot easier to procure it. We do that currently now with our AI calls. So we have our own AI agent that takes calls, and so we've got pulse data coming out from the calls that she's handling, and it's strategically geared toward things like that, like who's being mentioned, what are the competitors, what are the comparisons. We can see the season shifting right now because the trending pest is starting to change. We can see that what percentage of people are combining two different pests in their initial inquiry, where combination programs might work best, maybe carpenter ants and termites, being a popular choice. And so we're starting to convert that same concept that we were just doing with the AI calls with our own calls, regular, people calls, and starting to give that data back. But even when we were, even as we are quoting services, we call all of those quoted customers back. And for us, that's data. We're not looking to call people back to potentially win them, because listen, if somebody hangs up with you, they're most likely getting their problem solved, within the next 24 to 48 hours. But what we're calling back is to get data. And by that, I mean, we're looking at, why didn't you go forward with us? What was it price? Was it scheduling? And then that's the information that we were logging on the calls and giving back to owners. I had an owner a couple of years ago, 2 seasons ago, where we were very aggressive. All the things were there that I mentioned. Scheduling was you could offer same day at any time of the day. He would get somebody there. They would get somebody there. Their price points were good. Their service offerings, they were discounting things. They were super aggressive. It was the middle of July, and we couldn't get over the conversion rate that we set a goal for wasps and bees. I mean, it's July. How can you not, close that? And so it was from the follow-up calls that we were making to the people that said, no, I'll think about it. Let me, shop around, that we found out that larger, company was offering like a $99, $199, was the offering. And so we went back to the team and said, hey, this is the information that we're finding out. People are getting $199 offers for pest control. And he said, well, Margaret, I'm not, $199 canine pest control. And we were like, okay, well, now we know why our conversions are the way that they are, and we could keep going. Another week went by this, and we were still getting people, not being able to close a door. And he said, what do you think we should do? And I said, I think we should take advantage of the fact that it's July and it's one-time surface bee season. And so we pivoted. We brought our pricing down. We removed the warranty. We went out. We increased our conversions from like 60 to, again, 75%. And then August 1st, we went back to business as usual and put our pricing down. But it was that, that information, that data that we were able to pivot immediately and capitalize on the season so that we didn't lose out. Otherwise, we would have came to the end of the month and said, okay, well, that's done and over with. We lost the opportunity and the conversion was what it was. So data has always been, right, like such a crucial part of what you're doing every day.
You're dropping a lot of jewelry today, Margaret. That was so. I think if you're listening and you don't walk away from this podcast with anything else other than the tactic of following up with customers with second goal, obviously primary goal being conversion, but then the second goal ultimately being get the feedback, get the data as to why they did not go with you. I mean, that alone is probably going to make you a ton of money this busy season, because that data it's worth its weight in gold. The fact that you actually can figure out why are leads not closing, why is our close rate not high enough or not as high as we would like it to be. And so simple, right? And you're doing all of that on a recorded line. So then taking that transcript, taking all those transcripts and analyzing that data, I mean, just like so good.
Yeah, it's strategic. Like, when you're calling people back, that you're going to get maybe a 1 to 2%, conversion out of it. The intent behind our follow-up calls on quoted services was never to close it. It was to get information.
How long after is this a call back that you're doing like 48 hours after they've called in, you've had the conversation you couldn't close?
So that question comes up a lot. And so it's funny because I'm just a, proponent on, if a couple of things. If I'm ending this call, because again, we can't sell everything. But if this customer says, I'm going to continue to call around, I just want to keep calling around, I'm already starting to procure. Well, what was it that I said? Was it price? Was it this? All bets are off. You're hanging up on me anyway, right? So why not, go shoot your shot? But, if somebody says I'm going to call around, I'm calling you back probably in like an hour or 2 hours because I want to know if you've had a chance to call around. I can't tell you how many times as an inside salesperson, I won people back because they were like, Margaret, I haven't had a chance to call around. Let's just schedule it, right? I haven't had a chance. There's that aspect. Or, this is pest control. If you're telling me you're going to follow up with your person, later on today, I'm calling you in the morning. I'm hoping they came home last night, right? Like, did you guys talk about it? Like, are you ready to move forward? I get if something's maybe a bigger ticket, maybe wait a little bit, but no, like immediately. Because there's that small 1 to 2% chance that you win them back because they haven't made a decision yet. But what's there to wait for?
Nothing. There is nothing to wait for. So again,
the cycles of
great
like 2 day,
advice.
3 day, there's a strategy even to call back that we do that I won't give away all the secret sauce. But all I can say is what are you waiting for?
Yeah. And I mean, that as you're saying that, I'm just thinking like, what a great, it's clear why you're an operator at the level that you are with Grit, because that sense of impatience and urgency, I mean, that's just great leadership, right? That's taking the bull by the horns and just saying like, let's go. There's no good reason to wait or stall, and coming from a place of like empowerment as opposed to a place of fear. Like you said, you have nothing to lose at that point.
Yeah.
Cool. What's the biggest office bottleneck you see when pest control companies are trying to grow past, let's say, like the $3 million mark? Because we have a lot of clients who come to us and seem to have been in like that $2-3 million in revenue, and that seems to be like a plateau that we see a lot of clients.
Yeah. I mean, what owner's never been a good bottleneck for their organization, right? But I mean, I think as far as, the trajectory of that, like, at like 500,000 or at $1 million, I think that you can get away with maybe 1 or 2 people answering the phone and just trying to do their best, right? I think that there comes a marker like that, like the 2 to 3 million, where that stops working. And now you start to need scripts, call flows, KPIs, coaching for those people. And so I think that sometimes is the bottleneck for growth, is that a lot of companies never kind of build that system. So it's like, it's like the field team scales, right? But the marketing scales, but the office kind of never evolves. And then you end up with a company that, has a race car engine in the field, but, a lawnmower engine in the office. And I think that sometimes creates that scenario.
I love that analogy, and we definitely see that like really common for the customer service team to still be taking the the sales calls, right? And for there not to have been any like formal training for the sales team, or a lack of separation between sales and service. And ultimately that's an investment, right? It's an investment of time and money to make those changes in that department. And so if your close rate is not high enough to make up for the churn that you might be dealing with, which at that size is going to be relatively substantial. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And I train people, they
You
feel
switch
it, who have been there since day one, and you were that small kind of, company, and you grow, they feel the volume increase, and they feel their lack of efficiency. That time when it was just you by yourself in the office and you could just talk to this person for 20 minutes until they said yes and you figured it out, doesn't kind of work at 3 million when the phones are ringing and you want to be able to close that opportunity and get on to the next one. And so a lot of the times when I'm working with training with CSRs, they feel the growth themselves and their inefficiencies and their inability to kind of do what they want to do because of that lack of formal kind of training.
Continuing down this path that we've been going down throughout the conversation of looking at the numbers, what are the 5 numbers every pest control owner should track for their office team?
Oh gosh, I find that most offices don't track don't track anything. And that's where I think that, again, technology and the ability to kind of just get that information is so key right now. But, from your phone team, you always want to look at like your answer rate, like what percentage of calls are actually getting answered, right? You want to look at your booking rate, your conversion rate, what percentage of sales are converting into, what percentage of opportunities are converting into sales. You want to look at your abandon rate. How many people are hanging up before they even reach person? And that number is kind of telling a lot of the times. There's a lot of drilling down into each of these numbers when they're not what you want them to be. For instance, sometimes you will find that if people are hanging up before they even make it to an agent, sometimes your IVR is too long, right? Press 1 for this, 2 for that, 3 for that. People don't have the patience. Even though it's a quick ring to a CSR, they kind of disconnect. Or sometimes that's telling you that changes too. People's threshold for wait times is different in peak season than it is in off season. So, right, people are more likely to stay on hold a little bit, but your average speed of answer, right? If people take too long to even answer the phone, like that's an issue as well. And then obviously, the revenue per calls. Those are the things that I would potentially look at from a high level standpoint if I had to pick 5, but I'd probably look at like 15 or 20 on a daily basis.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you paring it down to 5. What's the most expensive office mistake pest control companies make as they try to scale?
It goes back to that bottleneck, right? The most expensive mistake is just assuming that any nice person can answer the phone, right? Pest control requires problem solving. It requires soft skills. It requires psychology, call control, call flow, etiquette, those things. So without, training, the CSR just answers the phone. Somebody says, I'll think about it. And then they move on to another more confident, person to answer the phone. And so I think that supply that over 1,000 calls a year, and it's a massive revenue leak. And so training and training and training and training and ongoing training. And it doesn't just stop once, it's training again. That muscle doesn't just, do a couple of push-ups and that's it for the year. You have to constantly be going through that all year long. So the most expensive mistake people make is, not training. Anybody can answer the phone, right? But how you answer the phone is what that customer remembers about your company and your brand.
Before training, there's hiring, right? So if an owner is interviewing someone for a CSR role tomorrow, what questions should they ask to determine if that person will actually be a good fit on the phone?
Yeah, I get asked this a lot when people are looking for like the ideal CSR, and I gotta say my best advice would be don't interview their resume, interview their instinct. I rarely look at someone's work history and completion. I'm always looking at the person and looking for hungry, humble human beings, and should absolutely, depending on what position you're hiring for. I'm a big proponent on hybrid CSRs, customer service and sales oriented, and those are also 2 different personalities that you're trying to find in one person, right? But I'm very confident in our SOPs and our scripting and in our training, so I can train you. This is a 100% a position of will versus skill. So when I'm interviewing, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for what are the instincts, what is the will, because I'm confident in my ability to train on it. And so, you can ask questions like, if a customer calls in and says your price is too high, what would you say? I'm less concerned about a very formal answer because I'm going to fill in that blank for you. What I'm more concerned is how quickly can you pivot? How quickly can you control this conversation and not be somebody who freezes depending, regardless of what the question is. So I would just say role play. If they panic and freeze under 30 seconds, then that's exactly what's going to happen with a real customer on the phone asking about their termite issues.
Interesting. So a little bit of role play during the question that you just asked. During the interview process, it sounds like you'll be able to distinguish between someone who is going to be quick on their feet and doesn't succumb to whatever pressure they feel from that question. Because the people who are going to be good on the phone are going to be the ones who can respond to that type question appropriately. Maybe not perfectly. They don't
Right,
have the
not
training. They don't
right.
have
You're not
your
looking for the
script.
actual right answer. You're looking for their
Right.
ability to control that conversation and be able to give you an answer confidently. Maybe not they're nervous, sure, but right, half of the we talked about what, the training goes into, it's problem solving. And you got to think about like how things are also changing with AI, right? So if AI is handling all of the simplistic calls and there are going to be things that are outside of the scope of the AI's capacity or things that are just, more emotional, more technical, and you want those higher level things going to this person that you're hiring, can they handle that type of pressure and so on and so forth, pivot and be able to problem solve quickly, because that also is going to change, right, the hiring process as AI continues to, be able to filter some of the more easier tasks.
And one final, really tactical question. What's the most important thing a CSR can do in the first 60 seconds of a call to maximize the close rate?
Oh, I talk about this all the time. The first 60 seconds is the most important part of the phone call. There's a lot that can be heard in the decision-making process. There's a lot that can be, said to that is the beginning of your call control. I would say the most important thing is to control the conversation, but making sure that the customer feels heard, understood, acknowledged, right? Like the one takeaway you can give besides, the thing that I teach the most is not picking up saying, how can I help you? Is to absolutely lead everything with, I can absolutely help you with that, right? Customers are calling with a problem and they want to be met with the fact that you are the solution to that problem. So no matter what their issue is, even if you're going to transfer this to another team member, or that you're going to potentially be scheduling an inspection instead of selling it over the phone, no matter what their issue is, I can absolutely help you with that.
We recently had another podcast episode with the CEO of Applause, the review solicitation, review management platform. And I had asked him what he noticed, or what Applause noticed across all of the technicians who had the highest review rate, right? Where the highest percentage of their customers who gave them a review, and good reviews, of course, not bad reviews. And he said they had one technician early on who stood out above all else. I mean, just wasn't even close. And they flew this technician out to speak at their HQ, and they asked him, like, what are you doing that is so special? And his response was not anything special. Frankly, it was not super tactical. It wasn't anything really like cunning or witty. He just said, on every single service that I go out to, I'm always looking for one sort of extra thing that I can do to solve a problem. Like one little extra thing that I can do to just kind of show them that I'm there, I'm their guy, and that I'm going to make sure that they're taken care of. And very similar, I'm reminded of that because of the response that you just gave, right? Which is just being of service to the person on the phone, being of service to the customer, the human on the other end who is calling you with a problem to solve, and taking seriously your ability to just help them solve that problem however you can.
Right, absolutely. And there's usually nothing that you can't resolve for them.
Awesome. Margaret, this was fantastic. I'd love to finish real quick by helping our audience understand, like, who's a really good fit to work with Grit, because I expect it's not just anyone and everyone, right? Like I said, there's about 20,000 active pest control companies at any time in this industry. So who's an ideal fit? Who works really well with Grit?
Well, I mean, over the course of the past years, we've kind of evolved into a complete, customer service support ecosystem. So there isn't something that we can't offer to everybody. We're now doing everything from, inbound call support, outbound calls, to customer service workshops, and inside sales, workshops, and obviously our AI support. So I think that we've got something for kind of everybody. And the great thing has been to watch companies come in, maybe, do the customer service, and then potentially need us later on for call support and utilize, our host of technology and innovation. So I don't think there's any more one size fits all. There's just whatever you need, we've kind of got it from that customer service experience standpoint.
Beauty of being in this industry for long enough, find a way to support everyone.
Yep.
That's
And
great.
continue to evolve. Yep.
Thanks for your time, Margaret. I really appreciate it. This was another really excellent
Yes.
conversation. So thank you.
Always a good conversation.